Okay, so now we are on module 2 unit 2, and like I told you, in unit 2 we are going to bring the demand side and the supply side of the market together, and we are going to look at the different dynamics of demand and supply. But first let me draw the market diagram for you. So now we have the own price of the commodity, and remember that's a dollar price that we are talking about. Here we have the quantity of the commodity. Now please note that I am just going to call it Q, because now we really cannot distinguish between quantity demanded and quantity supplied, because we are bringing the two sides, the demand and the supply side, together. But this actually is the QD and QS. We are measuring both QD and QS along the horizontal axis, along the x-axis. If I was reading quantity from the downward sloping demand curve, then it would be the QD. If I was reading quantity from the upward sloping supply curve, it would be QS. So to generalize the quantity bought and sold in the market, I would just call it Q. Then I have the downward sloping demand curve, which is our D curve. I have the upward sloping supply curve, which is our S curve. Now please note that in this two-dimensional space, whenever I have the interaction of any downward sloping curve and any upward sloping curve, there will always be a unique point of intersection of the two curves, and this point is the point of agreement that we discussed about in module 1 unit 1. And this point of agreement is basically the equilibrium, which we are going to represent with the letter capital E. So capital E represents the equilibrium in the market, and this equilibrium basically tells us that the buyers and the sellers have agreed on a quantity which we are calling the equilibrium quantity QE. The significance of the equilibrium quantity is that at this quantity, the QD is exactly equal to the QS. Okay, that is what QE means. And corresponding to it, we also have a price. We will call that PE, which is basically the equilibrium price. So QE and PE, another name for it is simply the market price and the market quantity. That means this is the quantity bought and sold in the market, and this is the price at which the transaction takes place. Now, if we assume that there was something happening in the market so that there is an increase in the price, okay, to a level like P3, okay, let's just call it P3. We could have called it anything, and basically these are dollar values. It can take any value, 100, 200, 5, 10, we don't care. But from our discussion in the last few videos, we know that whenever there is an increase in the price of the commodity, you see a movement along the demand curve or a movement along the supply curve from the buyers and the sellers perspective respectively. So here you would see a movement in the upward direction along the demand curve. You would see a movement in the upward direction along the supply curve. Now please note, along this blue line, you can no longer see a unique point of intersection between the demand and the supply curve. Or in other words, along the blue line, that is at price level P3, there is no point of agreement between the buyers and the sellers. There is a divergence between demand and supply, and that divergence is represented by a quantity demanded, which I am going to call QD3, and a quantity supplied, which I am going to call QS3. Now how do I know this is QD? Because I am reading it from the demand curve, and this is QS because I am reading it from the supply curve. So this basically means that at price level P3, my quantity supplied is higher than my quantity demanded. So along P3, the quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. That means there is more available in the market than what the buyers want to buy. Now this situation is also known as excess supply, and another word for excess supply is surplus. So what we see here is a surplus in the market. when quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. Now next, for whatever reason, if there was a decrease in the price in the market to a level like P2, and once again P2 could really be any, any price level, it could be $2, $5, $10, anything. At that price, please note, once again, I'm going to change the pen. This one is not writing as clearly as I expected. Okay, so at level P2, please note, if you follow this pink line, once again along this pink line, you do not see a unique point of intersection of the demand and the supply curve. There is no agreement between the buyers or the sellers. There is divergence between demand and supply. And now if you read along P2, from the supply curve, I could read the quantity supplied. I'm going to call it QS2. And from the demand curve, I could read the quantity demanded. I'm going to call it QD2. Please note that here the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. That means this is a situation where there are more buyers who want the commodity than what is available by the sellers to sell. So this situation is also known as excess demand, and that is also called shortage. So another word for excess demand is shortage. So from this diagram we can say that whenever the price moves away from the equilibrium, that means whenever there is an increase or decrease in price away from the equilibrium, always there is a disequilibrium created in the market, a disagreement created in the market between the buyers and the sellers. If the price is higher than the equilibrium, then that disequilibrium takes the form of a surplus, and if the price is lower than the equilibrium, then that disequilibrium takes the form of a shortage. So whenever the price moves away from the equilibrium, you either get a surplus in the market or you get a shortage in the market. Prices being higher than the equilibrium will always create a surplus, and prices being lower than the equilibrium will always create a shortage. But the good news is that no surplus or no shortage in the market is forever. If you remember from your module 1, unit 1, one of our fundamental principles was that the market always gravitates towards an equilibrium. A market always moves towards an equilibrium. If the market was just left on its own and nobody did anything to the market, there was no intervention by a third party, even then the market would work its way towards the equilibrium. Let us see how. Let's say there is a surplus in the market. That means the prices have gone to P3 and the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. So there is more available in the market than what is demanded, what the buyers want to buy. Now under this situation, if there was rational sellers, what do you think they would do? I have goods that I want to sell, but there are not enough takers for the good. Now in this situation, if I had to sell my good, obviously I would bid the price down to make sure that it gets sold. And if all sellers in the market think that way, then that would create a downward pressure on this price, and that downward pressure would continue until the price came back to the level of PE, quantity demanded becomes equal to quantity supplied, and equilibrium is re-established in the market. Similarly, if the price dropped to a level like P2 and there was a shortage in the market, so that there are more takers in the market than what is available. So I am a buyer and I want to buy the good, but there are not enough goods available. To make sure that I get the good, I would have to bid a higher price. Something like an auction, right? There is one statue available, several buyers, they have to bid for a higher price. So similarly in the market, whenever there is a shortage, the buyers execute an upward pressure on the price. They bid the price up, and that upward pressure would once again continue until the price comes to the equilibrium PE, where quantity demanded becomes equal to quantity supplied, and equilibrium is re-established in the market. So you can see that no surplus or shortage is forever. it's a temporary unstable stage in the market, but eventually through pressures on the price, either an downward pressure or an upward pressure, the equilibrium will always get re-established in the market. And that is the reason we said in module 1, when we were talking about fundamental principles, that the objective of every market is to move towards an equilibrium. Now in the next video we shall talk about the different changes in demand and supply, the different shifts of demand and supply, and how that impacts the equilibrium quantity bought and sold and the equilibrium price in the market.